So neuroscience terminology, we're going to go over that this evening. Anatomical and orientation terms, we're going to talk about those, plus word roots, Greek and Latin word roots like most English words are made of. Science words are no different. A lot of Greek, some Latin. We're going to talk about those as well. Common ones that are in neuroscience. There's a ton across, science as a whole, but some are more focused towards neuroscience or more common in neuroscience. So I chose to focus on those here. But anyways, let us move on. There it is. So what we're covering today, kind of talked about that a little bit already, but I'm going to go over it again. Talking about those anatomical and orientation terms, the planes and directions on our to refer to different body parts and all that. Talk about that. Anatomical definitions, we're going to talk about those. Word roots and examples of their use, and then we got some challenge words at the end. Okay. So first up, the planes, the different planes that we talk about when we're referring to the body and brain. Oh, that looks nice over there. Good. Yes. So the planes that we're talking about when we talk about the brain and the body and such. Okay. So the red plane, I'll start with that one. It's not at the top, but the red plane going through this person's body. Okay. That would be referred to as the median plane, or right down the middle. Median, middle, makes sense, right? You're familiar with those words. So the median plane refers to just the middle of the body there. That's it. Also referred to more commonly, I would say, is it's also referred to as the sagittal plane or a sagittal section. Okay, you're going to see that used much more often, I would think, and I have seen you'll see it referred to more that way, sagittal or longitudinal. Those are the three ways you'd refer to that plane on the body going straight down the middle of your face or your body. Sagittal or longitudinal more commonly, but sometimes median as well. Not as often. So the blue plane that we're seeing here, as it says, would be the coronal or frontal plane. I gotta say that most often it's coronal in the ways that I've seen it before. Usually they refer to as the coronal plane. And my anatomy teacher back in college showed me that, or didn't show me, but came up with this interesting way to remember it, where basically we think about having a Corona bottle, like a bottle of beer, a Corona bottle. And you take it and smash it over your head this way. That's the coronal plane. That's it. So it's silly, but you don't forget it, right? So I never forgot it since then, and that's how I remember the coronal plane for sure. That way. The green plane is the axial or horizontal or transverse plane. I gotta say, I see transverse or horizontal, usually transverse, used most often. So that is that plane as well. If you're splitting the body or the brain into top and bottom pieces, that's what you would call that piece. So a coronal plane splits the body into a front and a back half. The sagittal or longitudinal plane splits it into a left and right half. And the horizontal or transverse plane is going to split it into a top and bottom piece. And that's that. Okay. And then there's the parasagittal plane, which really doesn't get talked about very often. I guess it's just any other location that would be sagittal. I don't know. I don't ever see that used, but that's a thing, I guess. So there's that too. So the same planes exist in the brain, but they are oriented just a little bit differently because, as we talked about before, the body is standing straight up, but when we talk about the brain, we usually talk about those anatomical directions rotated by 90 degrees. So they colored these differently, but they're the same planes, really. We have this blue plane here, which would be the sorry, ouch. The whoops, let me go back. Yeah, it's the axial or the horizontal or transverse plane here. It's going to divide the brain into top and bottom halves. We have the sagittal plane here, which is going to divide the brain into the hemispheres, left and right. And then we have the coronal plane, which is the green one here. That's going to divide the brain into the front and back half. Just like the body, same thing, same planes. And they also have a parasagittal view here. Again, not really used in science very often. I don't ever see them refer to a parasagittal plane, but that's a thing. Usually if they're going to talk about a brain area that they just, I don't know. Yeah, usually it's just the sagittal plane. They just divide it in half and point to, hey, here's the bit we're talking about on whatever side of the brain they're going to talk about it on. But I guess you could divide the brain parasagittally and look at things that aren't quite towards or quite as median or quite as lateral if you wanted to. Here is a view if you want to see what a parasagittal plane would look like, or a parasagittal cut would look like on a brain. That would be it. It would look like this because it's not going through the nose, it's not dividing the brain into halves, left and right. It's kind of just taking off a side, kind of side of the head. And then you're looking a little bit in there. This is actually a view of somebody's fusiform face area being lit up. So this would be what a parasagittal view would look like, but you don't see that too often usually. Yeah. Again, that's not used too often. And that's that. Let me catch up on the chat though. I see you guys been chatting it up, which I'm fine with. I don't see why I would either, Ninja. Yeah, I think my Reddit account will be just fine. And Metatron, good to see you. How are you? Good to see you. Welcome on in. Special cheer emote gives a 10% bonus to streamers. Yes, Bearded Dragon. I mentioned that earlier, and thank you for giving in the first place, and thank you for using that as well. Which means Fatboy is up for a wheel spin. We'll do that in just one moment. Let's see. Let me catch up on the chat more. Okay, cool. Guy's not doing too hot. He's all blue and yellow with the. I know he's got all these things through his brain. Yeah, he's not doing too. And his eyes are just like out there. I don't think this guy's long for the world. I don't think so at all. I'll do it, Metatron. I'll freaking do it. The handy dandy fusiform. Yep. It does help us recognize faces for sure. Among other things, with the fusiform face area specifically. It does help us recognize faces. I'm actually, assuming everything goes as planned, going to be featured in one of Ashley Christ's videos talking about the fusiform face area very briefly in her video coming up mid-May. So if she doesn't, I'll be sure to shout myself out when I do see that video drop. So yeah, you can look forward to seeing me on there if you want to. And if not, that's fine too. Plenty of other people will. So no worries. I do see you guys took out Tortoiseshell Tansy, which means this little fat one over here gets treat, and y'all get some kitty cam. We'll also do that wheel spin before I give him that treat. Just take care of two things at once, you know? 2 birds with 1 stone. 2 fats with 1 treat. He also gets a chin scritch because he's a good boy. And because Bearded Dragon donated 100 biddies, which I appreciate. The chin scritch first, and then we'll give him that treat. Okay, boy. Keep him guessing. Can't have Fat Boy getting too used to stuff around here. He is a good boy. He is indeed the best boy, in my opinion. And also, Fat Boy gets treat. And y'all get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest little kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. You do a burrito cosplay, Fats? Oh, he's thinking about it. He's thinking about it. Are you using the Pavlov on you? No, I'm sure not, Metatron. Sure am not. No Pavlovian condition in here. He is indeed very good at the burrito cosplays. He's kind of a pro. He's a pro at making blanket nests. The point where we have to like watch if we're sitting down or gonna lay on blankets because he might be under there. He likes to sneak in. He's a pro. Got him. I love it. Okay, back to it. Another slide or two, and I'm gonna catch up with you guys again. But first, before I do that, thank you guys for being here this evening. I appreciate it. Missed you guys all last week, so thank you for being here to welcome me back. Glad to have you guys here. Fats is, well, happy to get treats. If he knew you guys were here, I'm sure he'd be happy to see you. But as such, he's happy to get treats. I'm happy to see you guys. Happy you guys are back. Chipotle versus burrito. Who will win? Well, it depends on what we're doing with it. Just for purrs and pets, burrito for sure. For eating, Chipotle. Absolutely. Anyways, moving right along. So those are the planes. Now we're going to talk about different anatomical directions. So when we're talking about these anatomical directions, we have to realize that we're always talking about it as if whatever person we're ascribing these directions to is in what we call standard anatomical position, which is basically like this person standing right now. Facing forward, arms out a bit, feet out a bit. The only thing that's different is his hands should be palm out. That would be standard anatomical position. You've probably seen that picture of, he should put on some pants, but you know what? It's anatomy, dog. It's fine. Everybody's got it. You've probably seen that picture from, I think Leonardo da Vinci drew it, but it's the picture, the old picture of like the person inside the circle, and they're standing like that with their palms facing forward. I can't show you on the screen, but palms facing forward, legs slightly apart. They're standing like that. That is standard anatomical position, or at least what it was based off of. Okay. So, whenever we're talking about these directions, you are assuming whatever position the person that you're actually talking about is in. You're assuming, whenever you're talking about this, you're imagining in your mind that the person is standing like this, okay? So, when we're talking about a person in the standard anatomical position, superior and inferior is pretty straightforward. Superior goes towards the top, inferior goes towards the feet. So your feet are always going to be inferior to your head. Doesn't matter if the person you're talking about is laying down, upside down, whatever, you're always imagining them being up in standard anatomical position. So all these directions are always going to apply to them in the same way, so we don't get them mixed up later, Part of the reason why we have that in the first place. That's why it's called a standard anatomical position. So we have a standard with which to discuss all these things about, or on, or with, or what other type of word you want to use there. So, cranial and caudal, those are two directions we can talk about. Cranial goes towards, you guessed it, the freaking cranium. Makes sense. And then caudal refers to the tail. We don't have tails anymore, most of us anyways. But we do have tail bones, so the caudal piece is actually going down towards our tail. Not necessarily towards our feet, but towards our butt, basically where our tails would be if we had them. We also talk about anterior or posterior, that's towards our front. And then posterior towards our back. Some people call the butts the posterior. My grandma did. If yours didn't, fight me. It's whatever. We also talk, when we're talking about standard anatomical position for people, anterior and ventral is the same thing. Ventral means towards the belly, and when we're in standard anatomical position, our belly happens to be in front of us. So that is the front. Those are synonymous terms. And it's the same thing with posterior or dorsal. So posterior is towards our back, and dorsal is the same thing. Dorsal means back as well. Or yeah, towards the back, whereas ventral is on the belly. So those are opposites as well. And dorsal and ventral are opposites. Posterior and dorsal, when we're talking about a person standing up in standard anatomical position, those are synonymous. Okay, those are some of the directions we would use to describe a part of the body. Like our chest is going to be anterior or ventral to our back. The lungs are ventral or anterior to the heart. We wouldn't really use that. That's an example. We wouldn't use that. We would actually use deep and superficial for those, but still. So when we're talking about, well, there's other directions we'll talk about. When we're talking about the limbs specifically, distal means more distant from the trunk or out towards our fingertips or out towards our toes. So the toes and the fingers are always more distal than, say, the thigh or the shoulder. Okay. So proximal and distal is pretty much only for your limbs. You wouldn't use them on your face. That just doesn't really make much sense. And then we also have medial or lateral. Medial, obviously going towards the center, the midline of the body, and lateral going towards the outsides of the body, or laterally towards the sides. And that's that. I did mention superficial and deep. I don't have a diagram to go with that, but superficial and deep, deep obviously means like towards the center of the body, like deep into the body, and superficial is going to be more towards the skin or the outside of the body. So our lungs are more superficial than our hearts. So you'd say the lungs are superficial to the heart. Our heart is superficial or is deep to the lungs. Our rib cage is superficial to our lungs, and our skin is superficial to our ribs, things like that, and so on and so forth. So you kind of just everything is everything is relative to one another. That's what these directions help us do, is kind of describe where things are relative to one another. That's how these directions line up with our body, but they are a little bit different in our brains, which we're going to talk about as well. Okay. So when we're talking about the brains, we kind of rotate some of those directions 90 degrees, because some of them just don't really make sense otherwise. So, and also here, when we're talking about the brains, we tend to use other things besides the directions we talked about in the last slides. We'll use terms like rostral and caudal, which you'll see here. Rostral meaning towards the nose, and caudal meaning towards the tail. So in the case of the brain, rostral would just be towards the front or anterior. Those are synonymous here. And caudal would be towards the back or posterior, right? So the occipital lobe is caudal or posterior, and the frontal lobes, those are rostral or anterior. Okay. Kind of like, I guess kind of like that, Metatron, except not at all, really. So those are other terms we would use here. We don't usually use those so much when we're talking about like our body and anatomical position. We don't usually use rostral or caudal. We'll use caudal, but not rostral. We usually use cranial. But you could use rostral to talk about going towards your nose. And they actually show that here. Rostral comes up and goes towards the nose, and then caudal goes down towards the tail. So that's another way. But anterior, posterior are used more often. But you might see rostral or caudal if you're reading about brains as well. So note that here rostral and caudal are synonymous with anterior and posterior respectively, and no longer are they synonymous with dorsal and ventral, because those ones got rotated 90 degrees. Now the back of the brain is actually on the top. The dorsal part of the brain usually refers to the top of the brain. So up here we got the top of the frontal lobes, the parietal lobe. Those are usually the dorsal parts of the brain, and the ventral parts of the brain are usually the bottom parts of the brain. Brainstem are ventral. Cerebellum is ventral in the brain. All the basal ganglia, those are ventral. Okay, so those are some of the directions we'll use to talk about the brain. We can also talk about medial and lateral, just like we talked about with the body. Medial here would be obviously towards the middle of the brain, looking at the longitudinal fissure. That's the medial portion of the brain. And then laterally would be, out towards the cortex on either side. Totally use this as well. And basal and apical, I actually should have taken that note off because we're going to talk about it here on this slide. But basal and apical are terms that we'll use to talk about the brain as well. Okay, so basal refers to, just like it sounds like, the base of the brain. So the bottom of the brain, the base of the brain is kind of synonymous with the ventral portion. Basal portions tend to be in the ventral brain. We talked about a part of the brain recently called the basal ganglia, and yeah, just like that sounds, those are down towards the bottom of the brain, at the base of the brain. The opposite of that would be apical, or towards the apex, right? So that would be more towards the top of the brain, or if you think about what a pyramidal neuron looks like, it has that apical dendrite, that big thick boy coming out the apex of the pyramid-shaped pyramidal neuron's cell body, the soma. It's got that apical dendrite coming out of it. That would be apical. So the opposite of that would be basal. So yeah, those are other terms you would use, but you wouldn't really use that so much on just gross brain anatomy. You'll see that more for, I guess, microanatomy, things like that. But here is a basal view of the brain, or an inferior or ventral view of the brain. You would see all those used, I would say. And an apical view, or a dorsal view, or a superior view would be looking down at the top of the brain. Angry face brain, I guess you could see it that way, yeah. I never noticed that before, but you would, of course, Gerbo, being awesome at art and all that stuff. So again, or not again, but also, when we're talking about the brain, we'll talk about sulcus and gyrus, those concepts, or those objects. The plural of sulcus being sulci, or more than one sulcus, which is kind of an end cropping in the brain. The largest one you can see is the longitudinal fissure here. Fissures are synonymous with sulcus. You can see, if you see sulcus or fissure used, they're talking about end croppings of the brain. So this would be a fissure or a sulcus here, where the brain matter is coming in and going back out. This little valley right here, that is a fissure or a sulcus. There's the longitudinal fissure right there. That's the big boy. Yeah. And then the opposite of that would be a gyrus, or an outcropping of neural tissue, like this. This is a gyrus here, or these red bits right here. Those are also gyri, which is multiple, or the plural of gyrus, okay? Synonymous with the word cortex. If you see, for instance, the anterior cingulate gyrus is often called the anterior cingulate cortex as well. They aren't different brain places. They're different parts of the brain. They're the same place. They just use synonymous terms for that. They just do, okay? So if you see gyrus and cortex, they're referring to the same thing. They're talking about these outcroppings of the brain. Cortex sometimes also does refer to every bit of the gray matter here, or whether it's part of a sulcus or part of a gyrus. But if you see a specific part called the such and such gyrus, they're talking about, or such and such cortex, they're talking about the part that sticks out. or the hill, contrary to the valley. Okay. So, I'm gonna catch up on chat and we'll move on. There's the next neuroscience question. Where do most of our senses get routed through? On the way to the cortex. Where to? Not the fovea. Nope. The gyrus is the hill of the brain, exactly. One of the hills. Your brain is very hilly. It's got lots of gyri. Yep. And the sulcus is the valleys of the brain. Indeed. That's the one. Indeed. It is indeed Da Vinci we're talking about. That's the one. My boy DiCaprio. Got him. For a second you thought Fats had two tails. All of a sudden we realized it was just a blanket. Yep. No two tails for Fat Boy. If Fats had two tails, I think that would be all over Twitch already. I'm just saying. My Fat Boy. Burrito cosplay? Cranky old man cosplay? Okay. The meat and the cleave. There you go. That's a good way to think about that, Mackenzie. I like it. Sulkai of the Valleys. We love him two tails or no? Of course. Of course. You got it, Draco. Of course you did. So close, Metatron. You just missed the H, man. And always, as everybody that's new here trying to answer those questions for the first time, they often put a question mark at the end of their answer. The Quizbot will not accept that, so don't put a question mark. Just say the answer straight and sharp, Khajiit. Oh my gosh, look at this sleepy boy. He's getting ready for bed. English native? No worries. I'm just letting you know how it works, Metaton. Or Metatron. Just to let you know, don't use the question mark when you're answering those questions, because the bot won't accept it. And that's fine. No worries. Alright, alright. So, let's do the next slides. Here we go. Other terms, more microanatomical terms we would use in the brain, which we've talked about many times before. Oh no, it does still kind of cut stuff off with this. Shoot. I misjudged how far up that comes. Anyways, I'll go ahead and shut that down for a second. We have the soma right here, which would be a neuron cell body, which we can see on what looks like a pyramidal neuron here. We can't see that apical dendrite, but that's gonna be the one sticking off, going up here. But the soma is a neuron cell body. Soma, that word soma is actually a word that means body. So we could talk about a neuronal soma, or the cell body. But also if we're talking about something that's somatic, we're referring to something of our body, like a somatic complaint. In medical terminology would be something, somebody's complaining about something going on with their body, right? Versus like a mental complaint or a psychological complaint, So somatic refers to like the physical body itself. That's got that word root, soma. Also, synapse just means a junction between two neurons, or a junction in general, okay? Typically between axon terminals and dendritic spines, but as we've talked about, it can be between axon terminals and pretty much any other place on any other neuron, or it can be junction with a glial cell. It can be junction with a lot of different places. But usually when we're talking about a synapse, it's between the axon terminal and the dendritic spines. That's it. And it comes from the roots syn, with or together, and then cis, process or state. So the process of being together. Together, you get synapsis, right? Kind of like that. I don't know about that, Metatron. I'm not really sure what that refers to. So those are two terms we often use. We'll talk about those more when we go through other neuron basics, which we've done before, and we're actually going to do tomorrow. Anyways, so down to the nitty gritty of some word roots, okay? First up, cephal is one you'll see a lot in neuroscience or neuromedical things, or just refers to the brain or the head. Refer to either. Okay. Pathy can be a feeling or disease, like in the word empathy. That's what that word root is there. It's synonymous with feeling or disease. Or it can also be in the word encephalopathy, which means a disease of the brain. Which you can see here. This would be a coronal section. Like if you took that beer bottle and cut the brain in half, so there's a front and back half. This is a coronal section of both a healthy brain and also a brain with a chronic traumatic encephalopathy versus a typical brain. Okay, so I think we talked about this before. Chronic traumatic encephalitis is kind of like what it talks about. Chronic being over a long time, traumatic being having to do with trauma or physical, in this case, physical trauma, and then encephalopathy meaning a brain disease. So this is a brain disease that comes from a lot of physical trauma over a long time. Okay. And that's what a person's brain can end up looking like after a while if they are a boxer and they get socked in the head a bunch, or you're in some other position where you just take a lot of blows to the head for some reason. I can't think of too many, but I know American football players get that done sometimes. I would say less likely as a soldier because you shouldn't be getting hit in the head a lot. It's kind of, it's a one and done kind of thing there, I would think. But if you, for some reason, get into a lot of car accidents, I guess that could happen. I would say if you get into a few, you shouldn't be driving anymore. But hey, I'm not going to tell somebody else how to live. So, but yeah, this is what can happen to a person's brain if they get hit in the head a lot. There's a lot of brain atrophy, as you can see, versus this nice healthy brain over here. Here's that part of the brain we talked about just a little while ago called the basal ganglia, with the upper motor neurons filing through it here. And that's just like that's hardly even there anymore on this person. There's just so much empty space and atrophy that happened, Here's their parietal and frontal lobes. I mean, probably parietal lobes and temporal lobes here. So like, look at you can really see the difference in the temporal lobe. Look at that. Look how big and beefy their temporal lobe used to be here, or this temporal lobe is, and they're like, look at that. There's just nothing left. So much atrophy. It's just gone. It's crazy. So that is a thing that can happen. Again, that's just demonstrating those word roots of cephal and pathy. Talk about encephalopathy. We're talking about a disease of the head or the brain, usually a disease of the brain. So sight is a word root you'll see a lot. Just refers to a mature cell. So an astrocyte is a type of glial cell we've talked about. One of the main ones that makes up the blood-brain barrier. When we talked about the blood-brain barrier, we also talked about these ones, the parasites. Don't worry about what word captioner is saying, what web captioner is saying. It's not a parasite, like the thing that takes your nutrients away from you, but a parasite is another type of cell that wraps around your capillaries in the blood and the brain and helps form the blood-brain barrier. And then lymphocytes, those are of course mature immune cells in the body. So that's places, if you ever see sites like that, they're talking about mature cells, not stem cells or anything like that, but mature, fully functioning cells. Okay. Now you're familiar with these word roots probably, hypo and hyper. Actually, it should probably be whatever, it doesn't matter. So hypo means under or below. So you've heard of hypothermia, where if you get too cold, you have a lower body temperature than you're supposed to, can be deadly and all that. Hypokalemia is a thing that can happen where you have too little potassium in your body. That can cause a host of issues as well, up to and including difficulties with brain function. Okay, Madam Berry, welcome in. Good to see you, friend. Hyper, of course, stands for excessive or over. Thank you for checking us out. Appreciate that. Hyperlipidemia is a fancy way to say high cholesterol. Hyper being too much or excessive. Lipids would be fats, and emia means in the blood. Too much lipids and too many fats in the blood, or too much, in my case, or too much cholesterol in the blood. Okay. Hyperactivity, you know what that means. So we usually shorten that to if somebody's being hyper, they're moving around too much, right? Get too much energy. They're hyper, right? So too much hyperactivity, too much movement, too much activity. Need to calm that bit down. And let's catch up with chat. I see you guys went on that quest. Neuropilot says cumulative mild traumatic brain injury. Yep, happens to footballers. Yep, some soldiers. Yeah, I think, like I said, I think it's less common in soldiers. I would think it could still happen totally, but I think it's less common. Usually, the stuff you're getting hit in the head by as a soldier is fatal. More often than not, I would think. So, but of course, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm sure it can happen. Anyways, you saw the bulbs, Gerbo? Yeah, you can really see the damage there for sure. It's pretty crazy. Madam Berry, good to see you, my friend. Good to see you. Pertinent subject, indeed. Indeed. How you doing this evening? Hope you're doing well. Glad I got to catch you for a little bit the other day playing some Assassin's Creed, some of the Ass Creed. Glad I got to see you doing that. I'm gonna give you a little shout out. Guys, go check out Madam Berry. She is the artiste, okay? And she's a pretty damn good one if I do say so myself. She's also checking out some of the Ass Creed the other day. Check out the one during the French Revolution, I guess, is the one is what you were saying. I don't know anything about Assassin's Creed, but she was checking out some of that, so go check it out. There's a nice break, yeah. She usually does the art streams, but I pleasantly, surprisingly found her playing some video games too. And that's all right as well. So go check her out sometime. Check her out sometime. No matter what she's doing, it'll be good stuff, okay? I do see you guys took out Rancho Tommy Chong, which means this little fat one right here gets a treat. This little fat burrito gets a treat. Y'all get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest little kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. Whoa. It's a win-win-win. It's all good, bud. No, there isn't also a treat on the ground, but you're going to go check. I know. Yeah. There's even the possibility of another treat. He's going to go check it out. He was all tucked in, but then I dropped a treat. Now he thinks there's one on the ground, and his fat self is going to go check it out. Yeah, come on back, fatty fat fat. We're showing your butt off to everybody. Fats is doing his burrito cosplay tonight. I'm a good boy. Welcome on in, Spiked Painter. Good to see you. How you doing? How you doing? Hope you're doing well. Yeah. Let us continue. Hope you guys are doing well this evening. We're just moving through some neuroscience basics with some terminology, anatomical directions, word roots, all that stuff. So moving right along, and after this we're going to check out some more Slay the Spire. Something I played a lot of over spring break and this last week when I wasn't streaming, and that I enjoy. So yeah, that's what we're going to do. Fats' burrito cosplay is quite sweet for a cat cosplay. It is. It's about the only one he'll do, because he won't wear anything, so it's kind of this cosplay or nothing. What good boy. He does love to bury himself under some blankets, though. He freaking loves it. He'll, like, bury himself. Like, I don't even have to do that for him. Like, he'll just dig himself under blankets, given the chance. And if it's not too hot. Anyways, moving right along. More word roots. Okay. So, neuro, obviously, refers, or I would think it's obvious, pertains to the nervous system. Like, neuroscience is, knowledge of or study of the nervous system. Ology would be the study of, so neurology is the study of the nervous system. Gnosis or nausea usually refers to knowledge of. So prosopagnosia is actually a lack of knowledge about the face. Diagnosis would be differential. Diagnosis would be like ruling something in or out, saying it's definitely this thing, but probably definitely not that thing. That's what diagnosis is. I think we often use it in our language to mean like saying what a person has, but it's really ruling things in and ruling things out. That's what diagnosis is. It's which is why the dia part's there. You're saying what is and what isn't. So, little known fact, I think. Gen means the birth of, so regeneration would be, just fixing yourself, birthing the parts that are gone, To generate would be to make something or birth something, create something, all those good things. A or an are very common word roots we use in our language and also in science. Usually it refers to the loss or absence of something. So anosmia would be the inability to smell. Not the loss of your nose per se, but the loss of your sense of smell. Aprosodia would be the lack of ability to control your intonation, which is probably hard to understand or hard to imagine, but a person with aprosodia would just speak with a monotone voice all the time and not really ever modulate their voice, so you can't really tell what they're feeling or thinking or anything like that. They just kind of always sound like this. Even if they're really, really livid and really upset, they're just not going to tell you with their voice. They're just always going to sound like this, and they have to rely on telling you how they feel because you can't tell by their voice. That's how a person with aprosodia might sound. Don't know how much different that sounds compared to how I normally do, but anoxia, would be loss of oxygen or inability to breathe, I think. You have that, Metatron? Interesting. There you go. Psycho refers to the mind, mental, the unconscious. So psychology is the study of that, the study of the mind, the study of the unconscious mind, the study of mental processes. That's that. Okay. More word roots. Telo means the end or completion of something. Okay. And mere is a part of something. So telomeres, which you probably heard a bit about in science if you follow science at all. Telomeres would just be the end part of something. So we're talking about chromosomes, we talk about the telomeres, or the telomeres, however you want to pronounce it. We're just talking about the end of something. That's it. The end portion of it. That's all. A sarcomere, we talked about that a little bit when we talked about lower motor neurons. Sarcomeres are basically just a part of your muscles, or the functional part of muscles. That's it. So omas, if you see a word with oma in it, it's referring to cancer. Pretty much always cancer or tumors. So meningioma would be a cancer of the meninges, or the protective layers of your brain. Glioma would be some sort of cancer of the glial cells, one of the 4 different types of glial cells. Okay, but yeah, whenever you see a word like that with oma, it's always cancer. Okay, always. So emia, as we mentioned earlier, it means in the blood. So we talked about hypokalemia. That means low potassium in the blood. The emia portion tells you it's in the blood. So hypoglycemia means a low glycogen. I forget what the glyce part would be, but in the blood, low blood sugar, basically. Okay, thank you for checking us out. Appreciate that. Thanks for connecting with us. An anemia would be, lack of, basically no blood, nothing in the blood. Anemia just means you don't have as much blood, or you have it. If you're anemic, you're not producing enough blood, things like that. Okay. Osis. That's a disease or process, always. If something is oma, that's a cancer. Osis is a disease. So trichotillinosis is a type of bacterial infection. It's a disease of sorts. Osmosis is a process where water is transferred across membranes and concentration gradients. It's a passive diffusion. So it could be a disease or a neutral process like osmosis, which definitely isn't a disease. It's a function, or a necessary function for life. So let me catch up with chat here. Spike Paint, this is probably a stupid question. Let me stop you right there. Pretty much never stupid questions around here. Don't worry about that. What's the difference between a normal brain and the brain of an insane/psychopathic person, if there is one? It depends on the ideology of what they got going on, Spike Painter. It's hard to say. It's going to depend on every person. A psychopathic person's going to have differences in the way their frontal lobes function, and their the connection between their frontal lobes and the limbic system. That's going to look different. Some people who have different things going on, like dissociative identity disorder, like their brain doesn't look or seem to function any different, really. Like it's just looks like everybody else's brain. So it's hard to say, man. It depends on what disorder, what illness, what disease you're talking about. There's also the case, I'm not sure if you saw this before you got here, but there is, if I can just scroll up. A brain can look like this if it's diseased. This is a person who's had lots of traumatic injury to the brain over a long time. And their brain just looks beat up. It's just atrophied a bunch. So it depends on what it is. And this is a totally normal brain that we know of. But even this totally looking normal brain may have differences in function that cause different disorders. It's hard to tell just by looking. So my answer, it depends. It depends. Never thought you'd find us neuroscience channel, Slant the Deceivers. Well, welcome on in. We talk about neuroscience here in the beginning of 3 streams a night. And at the end of the neuroscience portion, we play some strategy and story-driven gaming. So tonight we're going over some anatomical terms and word roots, things like that. And then we're going to move into some Slay the Spire. So we have a different topic each night and then a different game each night. And on Friday, we just focus on the gaming, the variety gaming. And I always try to focus on you guys as much as I can. So yeah, glad to have you, Slant the Deceivers. Come on back sometime. We cover, like I said, we cover neuroscience 3 nights a week. Not always, Metatron. Psychology isn't always a study of craziness. Not even close. That covers only a portion of it. That's abnormal psychology. Psychology is the study of how the mind works in general. That's reductive. I think glaucoma is cancer? No, but it's growths that aren't supposed to be there. Glaucoma implies growths in the eye that aren't supposed to be there. Yeah, that's actually an exception. Thank you for pointing that out, Ninja. It's not necessarily cancer, I guess, but it is a growth that isn't supposed to be there, which could be referred to as a tumor. There's tumors, that aren't, growths that aren't supposed to be there, that aren't necessarily deadly to you. Let me catch up on chat. Ethanol just finished watching Game of Thrones, I guess. Yes, it did indeed get wild. That was a great episode. There's a reason why that was an hour and a half or 2 hour long one. Yeah, good stuff. Good to see you, Ethanol. Good to see you, buddy. How you doing? All right. Yeah, if y'all ain't seen Game of Thrones yet, I'm not going to spoil it or nothing like that, but go watch that last episode as much as you can. A lot of stuff went down. Done doing dishes and chores? Good, Drake. I'm glad to hear it. About to play some more Sekiro? Jump on it, man. Jump on it. Telltale sign that a burrito's about. That tail dough. When do I think that we'll have BCIs that connect us to the internet? I don't know, dude. I couldn't say. Computational neuroscience isn't as much my jam, but I don't know. It's hard to say. There was that recent study that came out that there was an interface that they made that was able to take just patterns of firing in a person's brain and change that into understandable speech. So no movement of the speech musculature required at all, it seemed. So that was really cool. That was interesting. That's a step in that direction, I suppose. But until we're connected to the internet, like functionally, I don't know. Hard to say. Really hard to say. In our lifetime, maybe, or in my lifetime, maybe. I don't know. Couldn't say. I really have no idea. Not as much my area of specialty. Gerbo said there's actually a positive psychology movement that specifically focuses on healthy minds. The conditions and processes that contribute to the flourishing or optimal processing of people, groups, and institutions. Yep. That's been around for a long time. We talked about that when I was in a psychology major, actually. Abnormal psychology is what everybody seems to refer to psychology as, but like that's only a piece of it. Like they study completely normal minds too, just to figure out how they work, how they process information, how they think about things. Like they look at it at a variety of things just to see how it works. It's not all normal, all other stuff, you know. Smart Arts, good to see you. How are you? Welcome on in. How the heck are you doing? Metatron says sounds like something that could blow up in your face. Not necessarily. I think science is careful enough to tiptoe around this kind of things. It could. I don't know. I, for one, am against like autonomous AIs and stuff like that, but they're gonna happen. So it doesn't matter if I'm against them or not. They're gonna happen. So you're currently in a mental health facility for a month, but you're doing okay. Oh, geez. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Smart Arts. I hope that things improve for you and you get the help that you need, and you are better when you come out, or you are safe when you come out. You know. Feel free to share as much or as little about that as you'd like to. It's up to you. Okay. This is a place you can discuss those kind of things. Not a thing that we specialize in, but absolutely a place you can talk about it. And like I said, overall, let's hope you're okay. Jandra, how you doing? Welcome on in. AI is slotted to take over up to 60% of the workforce in the next 5 to 10 years. Yep, wouldn't surprise me. Lots of stuff's getting automated. I saw like I guess it's a political cartoon. I don't know. But there was this dude, like obviously, like they're in a factory, like a break room. And there's this dude saying like, I don't want my job taken away by somebody who doesn't even speak English. And there's like a robot across from the table saying, it won't be. Like, oh. It's kind of true, you know? Out of those unskilled labor jobs and stuff like that, those repetitive tasks, they're going to be taken over by robots, you know? I've seen like a bricklaying robot, there's lots of factory robots, like, yeah, lots of automation's going to happen. There's different computer programs, and I guess, well, I mean, not AI, but like, you know, computer programs that can write like stock updates and stuff like that, like that are passable, that you can't really tell a computer wrote. So, you know, there goes another thing that humans used to do that a computer can do just as well. So, and Go Wars 2 and Game of Thrones spoilers are real. Well, keep them to yourself, man. Sorry to hear that. The only spoiler I want to know about is when George R.R. Martin's going to finish the freaking series. Honestly, at this point, I feel like it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Like, he's not getting any younger. He ain't going to run a 5K anytime soon. I don't believe he's actively working on the books. I don't think he's going to finish them. So, it's unfortunate, but I think that's where it's going to be. And I unfortunately also feel the same way about the King Killer Chronicles. I don't think that Rothfuss is going to finish that third book, at least not anytime soon. I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't happen. It sucks, but I think that's where it's at. So, it's a bummer. Smart Art says, I came to a place of no longer being safe. Okay, I was taken to the hospital and stayed there for 3 days. Then came home for a few days, which is when I met you. We're glad to have you. Then I was in a place, then I was placed in this live-in facility to try and deal with some things to do with bipolar and PTSD. It's hard being around people, most of all. I hear you. I hear you, Smart Arts. Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you are... I hope that you're getting the help that you need there and finding some solace and making some gains and, you know, making it so that you're able to live outside of that facility as independently as possible and as soon as possible, okay? I'm glad that you're here with us. Exactly, Drandra. Exactly. Gerbo said, as robots take more and more unskilled labor, the barrier for entry of jobs increases, and ideally, education will be more affordable so we don't get increasing wage gap from it. Well, yeah, maybe in the future, because right now education isn't financially accessible for most people. It should be, but it's not. There's more and more of an expectation that you need to go to college to get a good job, but it's becoming more and more unaffordable for people. You know? Like my wife and I have like a freaking house's worth of student loans, and yeah, we shouldn't both have graduate degrees and not be able to, you know, buy a home. It's stupid. And that's like, we're better off than some people, I think, than many people. So I'd say so, Ninja. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't think he's gonna finish it. Not gonna happen. I would hope that comes that way, Gerbo, but I mean, it depends on who makes that choice, you know? I would say if the wrong people make those choices, there won't be that kind of thing. Absolutely, Smart Arts. Find love and acceptance here? Hell yeah. This will get judged by strangers? Fuck them. They don't know what you're going through. Honestly, those kind of people that are going to judge you for what you are and who you are and what you're going through, like, fuck them. You don't need those people in your life, okay? Show the people here your channel and told them about it. They're pleased to see this and are spreading the word. That's awesome. Thanks, Smart Arts. I appreciate that. We're glad to have anybody that wants to watch and learn and just have a place that they can come relax. Talk about who they are. Talk about what they are. Talk about what they want to talk about. Yeah, it's fine. I'm okay with that. As long as it jives with our chat values down below, I'm okay with it. Absolutely, Draco. Thank you. Neuropilot says there's a school, the Lambda School, that's working on tying tuition repayment to future earnings. So if they don't make money, you don't repay the loans. That'd be nice. Wish ours got that way. Right now, like student loans is a freaking racket, dude. It's so, jeez, it's dumb. Yep, exactly, Neuropilot. Screw them. Those are not people you need in your life, right? And if you guys enjoy this aspect of this channel, you're gonna love this person's channel. She's another TKF member, a longtime friend of mine. Good old Anxiety. You want to go see them, okay? Or you want to go see her. Her channel is also all about mental health. She is actually a mental health advocate here on Twitch. That's what she does. It's what her streams focus on, and she is very much about that life as well. So you want to go check her out as well if you enjoy that aspect of this channel. She usually streams earlier in the day than I do. So if you want another place that's like that, 3 nights a week, you want to go check her out too, okay? Indeed, Draco. He did. Modded Draco today. Been thinking about it for a while. Did it. Let's see. Catch up on chat here a bit more. Student loans, they are immune from a bankruptcy case. They are, yeah. And in some cases, like if you die and they can get passed on to your family members and stuff like that. Like this is like, it's stupid. Like, oh my God, it's so ridiculous, man. Right now, like the U.S. national government is like the largest lender in the country, and it shouldn't be that way. They shouldn't be a bank, you know. But anyways, if you don't have money to go to college, like I would advise against going in the first place because student loans are just stupid. Anyways, I see you guys took out Tortoiseshell Tansy, which means this little fat boy right here. This little burrito gets a treat. Y'all get some kitty cam. Thank you guys for donating again to Fat Boy's Fat Belly Fund, dedicated to keeping him the fattest little kitty on Twitch. He appreciates it. I appreciate it. You all love it. It's a win-win-win. Oh, good boy. Yeah, I couldn't say about college in South America or anything like that. I don't know. This stuff's got to be... There needs to be changes in this country. It's going to happen. Yeah, I did that. I did that for sure. Neuropilot. Definitely started at a community college. There's no reason to start out at a 4-year college if you need to pay for it yourself. There's just no reason to do it. You get the same college credits and pay much less at a community college. There's no reason to do that. No reason. Anyways, onward. So we talked about these. We use these words a lot on stream, but ipse is the word root that means same side. So ipsilateral means the same side. Or yeah, same or self is ipse. Ipsilateral, same side. So ipsilateral part of your brain is same side of your brain. These this blue fiber here and this yellow fiber here, these are going down the ipsilateral side of a person's spinal cord. We can tell it's the spinal cord because we can see that little butterfly that's in the center of the spinal cord tissue. And then the opposite of that would be contra. Contra means opposite or against. So the contralateral would be the opposite side. This red fiber here is crossing over to the contralateral side of the spinal cord. And same with this one. These blue fibers in the back here, those are crossing over to the contralateral side of the spinal cord as well. Okay, and that's that. Pretty easy ones. We use those ones a lot. Ipsilateral, contralateral, we talk about that a lot in the brain, for sure. All right. More word roots. So opia or opsia, that refers to sight or vision. So myopia is nearsightedness. We often use that more colloquially. If you hear the term myopic, you're saying somebody's being like nearsighted. They're not seeing the big picture. They're not seeing the long game, you know? Someone's being short-sighted. But myopia is actually short-sighted. I think hyperopia is far-sighted, where you can't see stuff far away. Something like that. I get this mixed up. Osmia, we talked about that earlier when we talked about that word root an. So osmia is the sense of smell. So anosmia is the absence of the sense of smell. Phasia or lalia refers to speech or utterances. So aphasia, a being the absence of and phasia being speech. Aphasia means absence of speech, right? Or absence of, and usually it's the absence of language. They just can't produce language. Or at least not in a typical way. Coprolalia, we talk about that usually when we talk about the disorder Tourette's. It's basically the very, very small portion of Tourette's that the entire disorder gets attributed to or gets attributed with. Coprolalia is basically just the utterance of random expletives and things like that over and over again, as Tourette's is, but that's a very, 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 very rare portion of Tourette's, which is actually a much larger and more diverse or more complex disorder. So lalia, like lala, kind of exactly, kind of like that, like you're saying something. Exactly, good way to remember that. So dys, D-I-D-Y-S, dys means abnormal or bad. So dysarthria is basically abnormal movement. That's what that would refer to. Other dys words are going to refer to something that's abnormal. Just not working correctly, you know, not developing correctly, not working correctly, just not the way that it should be, right? And that is different than this word root dys. This is a Greek word root, dys, meaning abnormal or bad. This is a Latin word root, I believe, meaning the absence of. So they actually mean something different. They aren't interchangeable, although we do use them interchangeably nowadays, but they actually aren't, and they do mean different things. So. And then here's a whole bunch more word roots that I don't know, couldn't come up with pictures for. So we'll go through those real quick. So homeo means same kind or similar. Homeostasis usually refers to just staying in that same state, right? The state of being the same or same state. Endo usually refers to inner or within. So endocannabinoids are a type of cannabinoid or a type of molecule that comes from inside of ourselves. Endocrine system refers to more internal, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh gosh. Oh, I forgot the things that are released in the endocrine system. Hormones, there we go. The hormone system versus the exocrine system, which is more systemic or out in the body instead of in the central nervous system. So yeah, exo is the opposite of that, would be outer or away from. So the exocrine system is the opposite of the endocrine system. Exogenous would be outside of the body or occurring outside the body. Endogenous would be referring to something that occurs within us. Exogenous is something outside of us. Trans is across or to cross something. So transcranial magnetic stimulation would be magnetic stimulation that crosses the cranium and affects the brain, right? That's a relatively new, I guess, treatment or experimental technique where they'll use magnetic stimulation to ramp up activity in an area of the brain, either to see what it does or to tire it out temporarily to see how your brain functions without that for a while, in order to get an idea of what different parts of the brain do. They'll use this a lot with patients with epilepsy as kind of a non-invasive way to test what a part of their brain would do once they kind of nail down where their seizures are coming from. If they can, they'll use TMS to tire out that part of the brain and then run some tests, see how they function without that part of the brain. Is that a part of the brain they can remove safely, or does that really severely impact their ability to function as a normal person? So that's trans. Crin means to secrete or secretion. So endocrine would be secreting things within or in a certain part of the body. Exocrine is secreting it outside of that part of the body. I actually don't remember the exact difference between the endocrine and the exocrine system, but I know our body have both of those, and it's not coming to me right at this second. And troph refers to development or nourishment. So atrophy refers to basically just no development, or we usually use it in the case of decay, actually, to mean like it's gone away, like it's not functioning the way it used to anymore. It's not as built up as it used to be. But it also refers to a lack of development. It just never happened, right? And autotroph, those are what plants are. They automatically feed themselves. They get nourishment automatically. They make their own food, rather, right? Indeed, we did, Ethanol. We did indeed. That's Monka TOS. Thank you. Whew. They catch up on chat, and we'll move on.